Okay, guys. So basically, we can see I am not an artist, but I'm super, super visual learner. So in order to understand this for myself, I had to draw it out like 6 times until I came to this like configuration. Because for my senior thesis, we had to, or like senior integration paper, really, we had to come up with a like community development kind of concept that we did our senior project on. So mine was kind of combining sociology and community development to come up with a sort of like social theory. And if you know anything about sociology, basically don't try to come up with like every nuanced scenario to be like, well, this isn't true because my one friend is a white male and this isn't what happened to him because his family was poor too, and all of that kind of stuff. So basically, with sociology, like you need to be able to put nuance aside for a second to kind of like see the point that they're getting at and like suspend your perception or your bias for a second to try to understand like maybe a bigger thing is going on. So yeah, I just asked you to do that with me for a second. I also know that this is not like the fullest extent of this story, and I only told so much of it. So yeah, I'm just gonna get started. So basically, we all know that there's like an intense amount of social pressure to achieve manhood. And this is supposed to be like a weight, but you know, I told you I can't draw. It's fine. So there's like this intense pressure to achieve manhood, and we've all seen that through the media. Like if you think about socialization, which is like how you're trained to be a man in society, like through advertising and like through media and what we consume, like everything is saying to be a man, you need to attain power, control, status, and wealth in order to have this like masculine security that we're all supposed to like build our life on. And basically this is sold to us as this breadwinner role, right? So like the man's the one that's supposed to provide. And I realized in the last like 5 years, this has changed a little bit, but just hear me as like, this is kind of like where we have been, okay? So with this breadwinner role, there's been a lot of barriers for certain people. So like people of color you see here have a lot more barriers to attaining this breadwinner role and achieving this like role fulfillment. And usually white people have a much simpler time becoming a breadwinner through like traditional means. So people of color will face things like discrimination, poor education, history of injustice, and just, you know, like cyclical poverty, things like redlining. Like I'm not going through the extent of what all those things are because this is just one page and just one picture, but there's a lot to these different sections that could be explored. But basically, I'm looking at when those people meet a barrier to employment, to this role as breadwinner, what does that do? So that takes us to a social state called anomie, and that's role frustration. So basically, if you've ever been in a time in your life where you kind of feel really like you don't have a place and you don't have like certain cues that are like telling you what's supposed to come next, like this is what I mean. So people in role frustration, like when you don't have a job or you don't have a like place that you're supposed to go every day, it kind of like puts you in this weird dissonant state of like not having these regulatory social cues, which like social cues organize your brain and like categorize things for you. And so it puts you in this weird in-between state. And basically what I'm saying is that there's three things that I see that come out of this state of anomie. So when you're feeling this really dissonant, like weirdness, you are feeling things like shame, sadness, depression, loneliness, but you're also being told by like this masculine paradigm to numb it out and not feel those things, right? And so what happens is that there's these three ways that I see it going. So either you can just completely fail your role and disintegrate like out of society or out of masculinity. Like you can choose not to have masculinity, which is really not necessarily role failure. That's more just disintegration. But I didn't make one for every nuanced state, like I said. So the main two are going to be escalating violence or escape behaviors, which a friend pointed out that actually this is fight or flight, which just makes perfect sense to me because this is trauma, okay? Like this is a trauma story. So when you're faced with trauma, you're gonna either fight or flight, okay? So like, let's go through this fight behaviors. So that's gonna be like a lot of self-destructive things. Obviously, like, you know what violence is, but think about like a domestic violence situation. Like usually you can track back like the anger towards a woman, like coming from a misplaced, like, or feeling like they don't have power, control, status, or wealth. And it might be that they're like, the woman might have like triggered that for the man, but almost every time it's going to be a story where like the man feels like emasculated, and through that like escalating violence, which also can lead to things like issues of mass incarceration. But I would just like to say, like, I think a lot of people don't want to be violent, but a lot of people don't see another option for how to be a man than like what society is kind of like constructed for us to like get there. Because I think everyone would choose to like have that power in that, like be that hero for a family, like in the way that is supposed to be like the most accessible as like a breadwinner. But when you can't do that in traditional means, and like the cards are stacked against you and you like have to put on your own bootstraps or whatever, then the other way that society teaches us to get things done is like, think about like guns. Like how many guns in movies are like the end all like power stance? And why do you think we have so many like mass shootings and things? Like those are people that lost their feeling of being in power or having some sort of control over their life. So on the opposite side of that, we have escape. So we have like this question of like, where did all the dads go? Like, what is this fatherlessness situation happening? And I just really believe it's like people that are stuck in these feelings in this anomie state of not really having a place anymore. And they like can't deal through these feelings. And so you go to, what does masculinity say? What does our like propaganda or media say? And it says to escape through things like, you know, like drugs or alcohol or suicide. It might progress to like homelessness or, you know, like leaving the family. So basically, this is what I see happening is like on this, like, I mean, I'm just going to be frank about it, but I see on this like white side of this story, like, and generationally, like, I think this goes back a long way of like people in my research, I would see even these assumptions made about Black communities that are like, well, we see, you know, rising levels of alcohol, gang membership, drug usage. And also I want to say like, it's not just Black communities, like it's communities of color in general, because this is like the same kind of story in Native America as well. And in a lot of other people groups. But back to what I was saying, there's this perception of just seeing alcohol, you know, like rising violence. There's gang membership, there's drug usage, gang membership like is all about belonging too. So there's this like increase in that. And I think that a lot of white people, white communities, this has been my assumption before. So that's where I'm like, I'm not better than the person who's making this assumption, but I just want to clarify that it's completely wrong, and it's, like, it's misguided because you can't see the full picture. So basically there's this assumption made subconsciously, right, that, like when you see these things, you might assume like people of color are lazy or they're dangerous or they're bad, and that, like the white people that you don't see in this scenario would be hard workers or safe or good. And from that comes this like inflated superiority in white neighborhoods that you might see. And there's this like blame casting on people in other social scenarios. And there's this assumption that like what's the same is safe. And so that's what you want to like associate with. There's like good education there because property taxes pay for your education. And so things like redlining prohibit this like building of like neighborhood wealth or it creates barriers for education. And there's good education in other places where there's like more wealth and resources that can be poured into it. Wealth accumulation, even just living together with other people that have wealth, like you don't realize the layers of like net, like kind of like a safety net, like that you have from just being neighbors with people. Like, for instance, if your car breaks down, it's very easy to call someone in your social network to like get you or like pick you up if you weren't able to have like AAA or something. But for a lot of people in poor neighborhoods, like if there's not many working cars in the friend group, then that might be a quickly like escalate you into poverty kind of situation. And that the same is true for anything, like not just like a car breaking down. Like think about mentally, like psychologically, if you are having like dealing with depression or anxiety, but your friend in this neighborhood is like seeing this amazing therapist and can give you like tools for how to work through your breathing or whatever it might be, you're gonna have access to that stuff in a way that is like you wouldn't necessarily have access to in a community where resources are really limited. And so that's called like social capital. And then we also have like cultural capital and symbolic capital. And cultural capital would be like understanding the hidden meaning in like what you're wearing or like different social symbols that we like have language for. Social capital is what I just explained about like your network's capital. And just like, like they're teaching you what things mean in a way that's not necessarily written down. It's just kind of like socially constructed. So you just being there means that you learn it. And that's true of symbolic capital as well, but that's going to be more unifying things like logos or like associations with certain things that can kind of like get you into certain places. Okay, so on this other side, because of this inflated superiority, right, we have this split in society and this division where we watch like in other communities, like communities of color, we watch like this breakdown of the family unit happen. Usually, not always, of course, but since there's a lack of money for education, there's just like this continuous spiral of not like building as a neighborhood, I guess. Like, of course, there's going to be like a few people that get out or whatever, however they say that. But why is it like that the group as a whole is not like thriving? Because they were not able to build wealth accumulation in the same way, because there's things like redlining that prohibited people from home ownership, which home ownership like created wealth for a lot of people. And there was just really horrible like historical constraints that have had so much impact on like their grandparents, for instance, and their parents, that it's like we don't even think about, and we take for granted the fact that like our parents could give us a car or we could use our family's car, whereas their family doesn't have that car to be a stepping stone for their next like part of self-development and like getting into the workforce or whatever. Okay, so basically you have lack of education, and then you have, because of these things, like you have boys without role models, you have single parenting, you have like blame casting. It's just like a breakdown of the family unit, right? And so what I like to say is like, I think that this person is seeing all of this, and really it's like they're wrong of some assumptions, of course, but I really do think that the reason they can't see it clearly, like this is inflated superiority, and they're just seeing these like rising levels of issues in community of color, is because the social is veiled, there's white privilege, there's ignorance and history told by oppressors. And I think also just like a general lack of knowledge of our history, which I mean, I guess is ignorance, but I think too, I would add like the spirit of fear here and just say, it's scary now to like try to understand something that feels so complicated. But I really just think it's a shame story, and it's tied to like what we expect of men is not good. I don't think it's good for anyone to put that much pressure on a man, and I don't think that we were made for that. So like part of my thesis was like that like we're saying that we're putting so much emphasis on this breadwinner role when Jesus is like, hello, I am the bread. Like, since when are you supposed to be the breadwinner? Like, I'm your provision. You're supposed to depend on me to be that provider and like sustenance. And like putting men in this God role is like harmful for everyone. But also, not that men can't have work and be like proud of their work and be a like fruitful laborers. It's just like, and I think they are supposed to like find some identity and like satisfaction in their work. But I think it becomes, it just gets toxic and like warped and wrong when like them being provider is so emphasized. And I think a lot of the ways that like toxic or masculinity has become toxic in America is like because the way they paint masculinity in the media is like masculinity opposing the fruits of the spirit, like kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control are not mainstream, like the man that's going to be like the central John Wayne character, right? Like it's a totally different story being told. And I think that's just like a tool of Satan of like opposing the fruits of the spirit with a social veil is smart, because Satan's really smart and he does things to just be really confusing. And I just think like the person of Jesus is so opposite of mainstream definition of masculinity or like toxic masculinity, because he came to lay his power down on behalf of others and not to use it against people or to ever I don't know. And he's the only one that actually has right to that power, and is the provider, but he still comes to lay it down and like chooses to be disempowered on behalf of the powerless. And so, yeah, I just think, I hope that's, you're able to absorb what I'm saying. Let me know if anything, like I can clarify anything. It's a lot of social words, I know, and like sociology, but I have a 64-page senior thesis behind it, and like a lot of research went into it. So I'm not just like creating terms or something. But yeah, I just really believe that if we could do more work to see each other as humans and like as children of God, and meet each other, we could meet each other in empathy instead of through fear, and like take a next step into like working towards more of what God wants his kingdom to be like. So yeah, hope you guys, let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you guys are blessed. Bye.